My name is Amy Brown, and I'm 34 years old. I've been married for 7 years. My husband James is a vice president at an investment advisory firm, and we live with my mother-in-law Margaret in a 50-year-old colonial-style house in an upscale neighborhood of Greenwich, Connecticut. Before marriage, I was a music teacher. The classroom, filled with the sound of my students' piano playing, was my pride and my sanctuary. But after marriage, when my mother-in-law said, "A Brown family wife shouldn't be working," I gave up teaching. Since then, I've lived as a good wife, supporting my husband. My mother Judith lives alone in Boston. My father passed away 5 years ago. Mother is a former emergency room nurse who still volunteers at the hospital. She calls almost every week, saying, "Amy, it's your life, but I chose to be the wife my husband wanted me to be." And in March 2024, our first child was born. Spring rain was falling quietly on the VIP private room at Greenwich Hospital. After 12 hours of labor, a tiny life now rested in my arms. My treasure, I whispered in a hoarse voice, gazing at my newborn daughter. The baby had her father's black hair and my delicate features. James stood by the window, his tall shadow cast against the gray spring sky. My husband was a respected figure in Greenwich society, an investment professional earning $800,000 a year. Now, he seemed somewhat restless, pacing back and forth in the room. Ah, what a beautiful child. There was something artificial about those words. But in my post-delivery euphoria, I couldn't understand the meaning behind that sense of discord. Connecticut's top medical team attended the birth. My mother-in-law Margaret had insisted that the delivery should be worthy of the Brown family name. She elegantly wrapped an Hermes scarf around her neck and muttered, almost to herself, "A girl." The large diamond on her ring sparkled under the fluorescent lights. Unexpected. I saw my mother Judith frown at Margaret's words. Mom, in her practical shoes and well-worn cardigan, was a stark contrast to my mother-in-law in her designer brands. She approached my bedside and gently held my hand. "You did well, Amy." Those words brought tears to my eyes. While the nurses praised my strength in overcoming a difficult delivery, my mother's words carried special weight. But this happy time didn't last long. After returning home, changes began gradually. The nursery surrounded by luxurious pink wallpaper and hand-painted clouds. Little Lily sleeping in her Italian luxury crib. On the surface, it seemed like the most privileged environment possible. But my husband's return time grew later and later each day. Young mothers these days are too soft. In my day, we were much stricter with discipline. "The baby's crying is bothersome. Shouldn't we move her to the servants' quarters?" My mother-in-law's words grew colder day by day. While struggling with postpartum health issues and sleep deprivation, I desperately pored over parenting books. But no matter how hard I tried, in my mother-in-law's eyes, I was never good enough as a mother. And then came the fateful day. A rainy night on March 21st. 8 p.m., in the second-floor living room. Heavy rain clouds covered the windows outside, and the room was dim. As soft indirect lighting cast gentle shadows, Lily's cry broke the silence. As I tried to nurse her with my exhausted body, my husband's angry shout suddenly rang out. "Enough." When James stood up, my heart nearly stopped. "I don't want a girl. Get out." Lily, startled by her father's voice, began crying even louder. My hands trembled. "James, why? As my voice shook, Margaret stood up beside me, casting a cold glance. Leave immediately. We don't need you in our family. I held Lily tightly with trembling hands. Please, think about the baby. My husband had transformed before my eyes. His profile was unrecognizable as the gentle husband I'd known for 7 years. My mother-in-law's cruel smile. And Lily, crying anxiously. An unreal scene was unfolding before me. The sound of rain against the windows grew stronger, as if foreseeing the trials that would befall us, mother and child. I ran through the rain, holding Lily to my chest, trying to shield her from the rain with my cashmere coat. Without time to call a taxi, I headed straight for the late-night bus terminal bound for Boston. It hadn't even been 2 hours since I fled from my husband. My expensive heels were difficult to walk in and my ankles hurt, but I couldn't stop. Lily was surprisingly quiet. As if understanding the situation, she just pressed her tiny body against my chest, occasionally making small sleeping sounds. Her warmth was my lifeline. On the bus, I desperately held back tears. The streetlights flowing past the window seemed to waver, just like my heart. On the bus seat heading from Greenwich to Boston, 7 years of married life flashed before my eyes. At 2 a.m., I stood frozen at my mother's doorstep. My hair was soaked from the rain, and my once proud dress was wrinkled with rain stains here and there. My makeup must have been ruined, with mascara darkening around my eyes. But Lily alone was warm with my body heat, breathing peacefully. With trembling fingers, I pressed the intercom. The lights came on immediately, and the door opened. Amy. The moment my mother saw me, she seemed to understand everything. Tears were already glistening in her eyes. Come inside. Mother gently led us into the house. As soon as we entered the warm interior, the tears I'd been holding back burst forth. I fell to my knees in the entryway, still holding Lily, and sobbed out loud. I'm sorry. Mom. Words failed me. The tears just wouldn't stop. Take a shower. I'll prepare changes of clothes for the baby. Mother's voice was calm and practical as always. A precise judgment typical of a former emergency room nurse. But there was a warmth in her voice that I didn't usually feel. My mother's house had hardly changed since I left 7 years ago. The old but well-maintained furniture, family photos on the walls, and the faint scent of my father's favorite pipe tobacco. Everything was nostalgic and healing. While I was in the shower, my mother changed Lily's diaper and prepared warm milk. When I got out of the shower, clean pajamas were laid out. As if she had been waiting for my return. That night, my mother listened to me talk all night. From the beginning of my marriage, my relationship with my mother-in-law, to the events of tonight. Mother nodded occasionally but listened without interrupting. On the kitchen table, she had placed her homemade chamomile tea, its gentle aroma helping to ease my tension. And as dawn broke, Mother made her decision. Let's go to a DV shelter. I looked at my mother's face in surprise. But, a shelter, for me. Words failed me. As a wife from a wealthy Greenwich family, the word shelter seemed unfitting. It's dangerous to go back to your house. James isn't in his right mind. You need legal protection. Money and social status don't matter. What's important is yours and Lily's lives. Mother was already reaching for the phone. Having worked as a nurse for over 30 years, she had many connections. Through her hospital work experience, she also had connections with domestic violence support organizations. A few hours later, we headed to a shelter located away from Greenwich. Mother's compact car was different from the Mercedes I was used to, but somehow it felt comfortable. From the outside, the shelter looked like an ordinary apartment building. There were no prominent signs, only security cameras installed. But inside, it was filled with more warmth than I had imagined. "Welcome." Director Marion greeted us. Her gentle smile at around 55 years old helped ease some of my tension. With her gray-streaked hair tied back and wearing modest but neat clothing, she exuded a calm trustworthiness. "What a beautiful baby." While gently stroking Lily's cheek, Marion continued her careful explanation. "Here, your and Lily's safety is our top priority. We can arrange consultations with lawyers, and we have necessary living supplies prepared. Staff are on duty 24 hours a day, so please don't hesitate to ask if you have any concerns." That same day, my mother went out to buy necessities for me. Basic clothing, daily necessities, and childcare items for Lily. Though they were bought from local supermarkets and discount stores rather than department stores or brand shops, they somehow held a special warmth. "Tomorrow, I'll introduce you to a trustworthy lawyer. Jessica Watson. She's an expert in women's rights." When Mother said this before leaving that night, I finally realized my situation. This is reality. I had fled from my husband and was in a shelter. The large mansion in Greenwich, the maids, the luxurious life, all were now in the past. But strangely, the fear had faded. Instead, I even felt a kind of liberation. Life in the shelter was completely different from what I had imagined. There were women with similar experiences. Sarah had been a director at a major corporation. Kate was a pediatrician. Jennifer was a housewife. I learned firsthand that violence can happen to anyone, regardless of social status or economic situation. I couldn't believe it at first either, Sarah quietly told me one night while drinking tea in the shared kitchen. "You might wonder why someone like me, who became an executive at a company I worked at for 20 years, is in a shelter. But violence has nothing to do with class." Her words struck deep in my heart. Indeed, why was I, who had lived in a Greenwich mansion with a husband earning $800,000 a year, here? The answer was simple. To escape violence. That had nothing to do with social status. Lily thrived even in this environment. Now 3 months old, her expressions had become more varied. Her smile became everyone's source of healing at the shelter. The other residents doted on her as if she were their own grandchild. A baby's smile gives us hope, doesn't it? When my roommate Sarah said this, I wholeheartedly agreed. Just seeing Lily's smile made me feel like I could overcome any difficulty. As promised, Mother visited twice a week without fail. Each time, Lily would happily wave her arms and legs. While holding Lily, Mother would tell stories about when I was a child. "You used to smile just like this. Becoming a mother helped me grow too. Now you're having the same experience." Mother's words gave me new insights. Being called a mama is such a happy thing, isn't it? When I confided this to Mother one day, she smiled gently. "Yes, it is. That's why you made the right choice. For Lily's sake, and for your own." In twice-weekly counseling sessions, I had time to face my emotions. Anger towards my once kind husband, disappointment at being betrayed, and love that still remained. Everything was intricately tangled. It's natural to have complex feelings. Healing begins with acknowledging them. Jane, the counselor, said this while helping me sort through my feelings. Our sessions always left my heart feeling a little lighter. Gradually, I began to reclaim my life. One day, when I found an old piano in the shelter's common space, my heart filled with nostalgia. Memories of my time as a music teacher came vividly flooding back. I gathered my courage and started giving simple piano lessons to the children at the shelter. At first, just once a week for 30 minutes. But watching the children's eyes shine and fill with the joy of experiencing music, something changed within me. "Teacher, please teach us again." Each time I heard those words, I felt new hope sprouting. The old me would have been ridiculed by my Greenwich friends if I said, "I'm teaching piano at a shelter." But now it's different. The children's pure joy had become my pride. Mother quietly supported me while watching over my progress. There's no need to rush. Take it one step at a time. A wonderful future is surely waiting for you. With Mother's words in my heart, I grew stronger, slowly but surely. I felt more like myself now than when I was playing the perfect wife in the Greenwich mansion. The sky visible from the shelter window might have been narrower than the one I saw in Greenwich. But that sky seemed filled with infinite possibilities. Holding Lily close, I whispered in my heart, "This is our new beginning." As our life in the shelter was approaching the 1-year mark, tragedy struck suddenly. A body has been discovered in the lake. Early morning, a phone call from the police woke me up. Having just arrived at the guest room in the Brown house, Lily was sleeping peacefully beside me. It was still before dawn, and the window outside was tinged with a faint purple. "We have confirmed the identity as James Brown." At those words, the receiver nearly fell from my hand. The body discovered this morning in Greenwich Lake was undoubtedly my husband's. When we arrived at the lakeside, several police vehicles and ambulances were parked. Early summer mist drifted over the lake's surface, creating an otherworldly scene. Mother embraced me from behind. "Stay strong, Amy." The body had already been removed, but his belongings remained by the lakeside. A familiar expensive suit jacket. The gold watch he always wore. And an envelope. "Ma'am, this suicide note was found at the scene." The envelope handed to me by the police officer had, "To Amy," written in familiar handwriting. My hands trembled. Taking a deep breath, I opened the envelope. "Amy, please forgive me. I was a fool." James's final words danced before my eyes. He had been completely deceived by a woman named Carol Smith. Last spring, she had approached him with a calculated plan. Appearing as a new employee at the investment advisory firm, she played the role of a brilliant and ambitious young employee, gradually capturing James's heart. She showed me dreams. Groundbreaking investment opportunities, enormous profits, and the birth of a son. Carol had used pregnancy pills to fake her pregnancy. It was a perfect plan that cleverly exploited the Brown family's obsession with an heir. Margaret's heart was completely in her palm with her desire for a male grandchild. Mother would say every day, "It's a boy, surely it's a boy." "Amy, that rainy night when we drove you and Lily out, I was already caught in her trap." Pushed by Mother's voice. The suicide note also detailed how the assets were lost. It started with small transfers under the guise of investments. The amounts gradually increased, until finally they touched the mansion, cars, and even company assets. By the time I realized, it was too late. $20 million. Almost all of the Brown family assets were gone. I had even touched company funds. And the final blow. The pregnancy, the birth, the male child, everything was a lie. Carol had used forged documents and even prepared a birth certificate for a non-existent male child. A perfect deception that even included tampering with hospital databases. When I learned the truth, I wanted to die. The Brown family honor, built up since my father's time, had fallen to the ground. I had lost company funds and couldn't escape criminal responsibility. And above all, you and Lily, in such a way. At the end of the note, there were words for Lily. Lily, I'm so sorry. I had an angel like you as a daughter, yet I made the worst choice as a father. In the future, you might be pointed at as that man's daughter. But that's all my sin as your father. You are completely innocent. According to the police, Carol Smith was a habitual marriage fraudster. 3 similar cases had already been reported, with this being the largest amount stolen. Using pregnancy pills for pregnancy fraud was her typical method, specifically targeting wealthy families obsessed with heirs. When I returned to check on Margaret, she was sitting dazed in her bedroom. All her former dignity and coldness had vanished, leaving only the figure of a devastated mother. I killed my son. Her trembling hands held a photo of James as a baby. The mother-in-law crying before me was no longer the cruel woman who had driven me out. She was just a grieving mother. The Brown family heir, a male child. I was too obsessed with such things. Margaret began talking through her tears. The long-standing traditions of the Brown family. Their position in society. Everything had bound her. You know, ever since I lost my husband, I've been fixated on having a boy. Wanting James to have an heir. But that obsession drove my son too. She suddenly grabbed my hands and desperately repeated words of apology. Amy, I'm so sorry. How cruel I was to you and Lily. How foolish I was. To drive out my own granddaughter, my precious, precious granddaughter. At that moment, Lily crawled in from the hallway. Still just learning to walk, she approached Margaret's feet with cheerful sounds. Margaret truly looked at her granddaughter for the first time. Lily's innocent smile. Her black hair like James's. Her gentle eyes like mine. She's so beautiful. Why didn't I notice before? As she lifted Lily with trembling hands, I made my decision. Hatred and anger were no longer necessary. What we needed now was to create a new kind of family. Mother quietly spoke from behind me. Amy, what will you do now? Outside the window, the sun was beginning to rise. The Greenwich townscape was being embraced by gentle light. We'll start over here. I answered while watching Lily and Margaret. I'll reopen the piano studio. Like the children I taught at the shelter, I want to heal hearts through the power of music. Mother nodded quietly. And Margaret, holding Lily, gave a small nod as well. The new morning light was announcing the beginning of our new life. A path choosing forgiveness over hatred, healing over revenge. For Lily's sake, and to fulfill James's final wish. We were about to begin walking as a new family. 6 months have passed since then. Miss Amy, I can play this piece perfectly now. Chopin's waltz echoes through the quiet residential area of Greenwich. I opened my long-desired piano studio in a renovated room of the mansion where I once lived with James. Many of the students are children from the shelter who shared those days with me. Thanks to Margaret providing a van for transportation, students can now come from far away. Wonderful, Sarah. When I applaud with a smile, Lily also claps her tiny hands in joy. My daughter, now a year and a half old, toddles around the piano during lessons, occasionally reaching for the keys. She'll be a pianist soon. Margaret gently lifts her granddaughter. Now, her expression has lost its former intimidating air, filled instead with gentle warmth. Last week, news came that Carol Smith had been arrested in Mexico. After 5 months of international pursuit, she was finally caught. Her methods had been sophisticated. Pregnancy fraud using pregnancy pills, forged birth certificates, even tampering with hospital databases. It was revealed she had committed more than 10 similar frauds. The total damages exceeded $50 million. Most of her targets were wealthy families obsessed with heirs. Our $20 million was just a part of it. The suspect faces up to 20 years in prison after indictment. When the investigator told us this, strangely, my heart felt lighter. There was no more hatred or anger. Only relief that everything was over. While some assets were recovered, we couldn't return to our former lifestyle. But perhaps that was fortunate for us. Because we could now see what was truly important, which had been invisible in our luxurious life. A house filled with piano music is wonderful, isn't it? Mother murmurs while making tea. She visits without fail every weekend, now an essential member of our family. Margaret has distanced herself from Greenwich society. Instead, she began volunteering at a local domestic violence support organization. Doing what I can, she says. James's memorial photo sits above the living room fireplace. Next to it is a photo from his childhood. Margaret sometimes stops in front of it, quietly closing her eyes. A time for regret and prayer. But now, her expression has regained its serenity. Look, Papa. Lily sometimes waves at the photo. Her innocent gesture brings us healing. Next week, 3 new students will join. Twin boys from the neighborhood and a girl from the shelter. Music knows no gender. That's our studio's motto now. In the evening, after the last student leaves, I sit alone at the piano. Though I gave up my dream of becoming a performer, I now have a new dream. Healing wounded hearts through music. The sun sets in the Greenwich sky. As I wait for a new morning, I play Schubert's Impromptu. A musical journey from sorrow to hope. It was the story of our family itself. Toward the yet unseen tomorrow. Toward the beginning of a new life for Lily and all of us.